Well, guys, after almost 5 years, over 230 episodes, we've had some really good conversations on this show. And so this year, to celebrate Christmas, to give you a gift, we're going back into the archives and capturing some of your favorites and some of mine and re-releasing them throughout the month. This is some of the best we have to offer on this show. And so we're honored and excited to share them with you again on replay this Christmas. We'll be back again at the beginning of the year with more conversations, new guests, new topics, and some more fun. But for now, here are some of your favorites and mine. Merry Christmas and enjoy. This is the show dedicated to raising up the next generation of men of faith and character. My name is Mark Stanifer. Welcome to the Next Men Up. Hey guys, welcome to the show today. The show dedicated to helping boys become healthy and godly men. Because when that happens, everyone benefits. My name is Mark Stanifer, and today we're going to get into the talk. No, not that talk, the other talk, the race talk. My guest today is Rich Johnson. Rich is a husband, father of four, pastor, a yoga instructor, and someone I've come to respect and admire. And he's also a black man, which makes him uniquely qualified to talk about race, both as a man and also as a father guiding his kids through society today. In today's episode, we spend time understanding and defining some of the many terms we are hearing and reading about on a daily basis. And we talk about the influence that Miami Vice and high school sports had on him growing up, and how becoming a man for him and his boys necessarily involves the color of their skin. When it comes to race and racism and injustice, I am on a journey of learning and unlearning, growing and getting better. And today I invite you to join me wherever you are and let Rich be your guide over the next 2 episodes. He is engaging, humorous, transparent, and inspiring. I know you're going to be captivated by his story and challenged by the way he eloquently, yet candidly, navigates through this topic. It is my privilege to share this with you. So let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Rich Johnson. Well, Rich, what an honor and a privilege to have you on our show today. Thanks for being willing to do this and for gracing us with your presence.
Yeah, so good to be with you, Mark, and all your listeners. Hello, thank you for having me.
This is going to be good, and I have to tell you, we have not really addressed this topic that we're going to get into today. Mm-hmm. And I come into it with a little bit of trepidation, because I haven't walked in the same shoes as you. And even though you and I have more in common as humans and as brothers and as men, we have different lenses and we've had different experiences. And so I just appreciate your willingness to bring that wisdom, to bring that experience, to open up and share your story for our benefit, for our learning, for our growth, and hopefully this will be a way to continue to bring together rather than to divide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lived experience. You know, for me, I'm 43 years old, and so I've been in this body, as far as I know, for 43 years. And one of the greatest gifts that I have are my children, 3 boys and a girl, and the intentionality to raise them in this world, to engage it, is my greatest honor, really. Yeah, that and being a husband to my lovely wife, who gave me the children. So.
Right. Truth be told, she probably did most of the work, right?
Told,
at least in the birthing process.
At least
anyway.
In the delivery process, yeah. But she's beautiful. Our oldest is 15, and then 14, 11, soon to be 12, and then 10.
Okay.
So we had the girl picked out first, at least the name anyway. My thought was, if I have a girl first, she's going to be able to take care of whoever comes behind her, and we had a boy first. And
Wait, it didn't work out
it
the way
didn't work out the way I planned. Nope. And then we had a second boy. And then we're like, okay, let's slow down here, because they are just 12 months apart, almost to the day. And then the third one, we were like, okay, we're ready for that third one. And we didn't find out what we were going to have, like the previous two children we did, we found out. And we were so convinced that it was a girl that we didn't even have any boy names picked out. So get to the delivery room, comes out, honey, you're not going to believe this. It's a boy. And she's like, you're kidding. I'm always joking with her. I'm like, I'm not kidding. It's a boy. Just kind of in that same tone, right there.
Right.
And so every day they'd come to the room, all right, does baby Johnson have a name yet? And it's like, no, we really don't know what to call him. We weren't waiting on a boy. We were done with boys.
You were 2 for 2 going into this one.
We were 2 for 2. And they tell you got a 50-50 chance, but after you have that second one, that percentage drops really quickly. So we finally picked a name for him. Actually, the girl name we had picked out first was Cadence. And so we figured, all right, we just have 3 kids. We're never going to have a girl. Let's cut Cadence down to Caden. And, that's how we got his name. And then the fourth one was a total surprise, out of the blue. Both of us are crying, Lord, we can't do this. And we wanted to find out this time, what are we having? We go to the ultrasound place, find out that it's a girl, and it's pandemonium. So 3 boys and a girl. She's my delight.
And you're right in the thick of it based on those ages. Like they're coming into their own and they are active, pursuing their interests. There's 2 of you and 4 of them. So you're playing this sort of weird contain, defense, penalty, kill type of scenario, right?
Yeah. I still try to exert my strength and size over them, but there's
good luck with that.
Good luck, yeah. They haven't figured out how to team up against me yet. I'm just like, guys, once you figure that out, it's all you. It's your world.
I always said, you just have to stay one step ahead of them, especially when they're younger. When they get older, they can sniff you out a little bit. But when they're younger, if you can stay just one step ahead, they'll never know. They'll never know that you're just only one step.
That's it. Parenting is just about being one step ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a truly great. It's a gift. It's a joy to parent. We love it. We love our kids and we like them. So
well, even better. I can relate.
Yeah.
So as you look across the landscape of where we are today and the time in which we're living, the time in which we're recording this, there's a lot of things that I would imagine you're thinking about as you're talking to your kids, as you're trying to do that intentional parenting. And there's a lot of terms that are being tossed at us front and center now, or become everyday language for those that are paying attention. Terms like racism or injustice or racial bias or inequality. Like this is where we're going to go today. But I wonder if you could spend some time just helping us to understand how you think about those terms, because maybe they're synonymous and maybe they're subtly different, maybe they're significantly different. But when you hear those terms, like what are the things that come to mind, or how are you helping your kids to understand those terms and what they mean?
Yeah. History and worldview are 2 lenses, I think, that come to mind, immediately. From a historical perspective, race is a social construct in that we're all a part of one race, right?
The human race.
The human race.
Yeah.
However, the construct of race as a category to define us differently from one another was created. And it was created not with the purest of intentions. It wasn't created to just define people in their appearance. It was actually created to define people with regards to levels of superiority and inferiority.
So class.
So Yeah, but not just class you can have even within one's, what would be the most proper term is ethnicity.
Okay.
So you can have class within an ethnic group, but race actually defines the ethnic group from one another.
Got it.
So it's a class on a different scale. So historically speaking, we were identified with the place that we were from. So I would be Rich Johnson of Toledo, Ohio, right? That's where I'm from. I'd be identified with the land and the place. Well, once race became this thing that we could categorize ourselves and define ourselves differently from, it removed us from land and place. We're no longer defined by our land. You're defined now by your color and your facial, features, if you will. And it didn't stop there. It then went to the place of, well, what is valuable? What races then are more valuable than others? And again, from a historical perspective, this was created by white Europeans. And so in order to define ones categorically against one another, this is a white European construct. And so when we find that where we are right now, it has its roots from 1,500 years ago as these things are being defined as we differentiate ourselves one from another. Because it becomes the reason by which you could take land from someone. It becomes the reason by which you could enslave another person. Because now we've defined our differences, and not just defined our differences, we've actually put a value on those differences. So one difference is more valuable than another, based on skin, based on gender, based on intellect, and cultural experience. So, for example, when I think historically about how First Natives were treated in North America, they were seen and viewed as savages, right?
Yep.
And so they weren't just people, they were savages. They didn't call Europeans savages. They called First Natives, indigenous people, savages. So they've already put a difference on there, and then they put a value on that difference as well, which then gave permission to say, well, the savages are not cultured like us, so it's our duty to go culturate them, if you will. It gives them a reason and a permission in order to do that. So, race is a social in its historical sense. There's one human race, but race as a social construct to define us is where we get the term racism, from. And racism is based off of that hierarchy or that level of difference that is, it is executed, if you will, with the sense of power to take what you feel like is yours, to have. So, racism on its highest level is this power dynamic and prejudice that work together to keep people from moving up what they've already perceived as to be the ladder of superiority, and race. That the way it gets worked out even on, say, an everyday level, because most people listening will say, well, I don't have the power to exercise any kind of, prejudice, is that it gets worked out in the ways of bias, and it gets worked out in the ways in which our institutions are constructed to affirm those biases. So there are four eyes of oppression, if you will. The first eye of oppression is ideology. It begins with an idea that one group is superior to another. And then it's reinforced by the second eye, which is institution. And so then that idea is institutionalized in everyday life. So education, religion, economics, land ownership, finances, even relationships, the institution of marriage, for example, who could marry whom and why not? Well, that began with an idea that then got institutionalized. And then after that institutional way of oppression, there is an interpersonal way of oppression. So that means how people relate to one another. They're just living out what is already being affirmed in the institution. And then the last I is an internalization of that belief. So it's not now just in the way in which we react to one another. Now I actually internalize it and believe it.
And does that internalization happen both ways?
It happens both ways.
The giver and the receiver, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where one believes they are superior and the other believes they are inferior.
Yeah.
Or one believes they are supposed to live life in this, particular way with these values, and another believes that those values are contradictory to the way they live, and therefore they have no option other than to just stay in the place that they're in.
Yeah.
So one of the things I share with my boys, in fact, is a picture from my fifth grade year. And I've got this party shirt on. It's bright orange, paisleys. I mean, it's wild. And a blue blazer, like a bright blue blazer that offsets this orange. It's hideous. It's horrible. But it was the style, in fifth grade.
At least somewhere.
Somewhere. And the somewhere I got it from was Miami Vice. So if you remember Miami Vice, Don Johnson,
that's right.
Philip Michael Thomas.
Yep.
I love that show. I shouldn't have been watching in fifth grade, but, it's a Friday night. After Night Rider was Miami Vice, and my parents let me stay up. So I wanted to be like Don Johnson. Don Johnson was the white character in Miami Vice. Sonny Crockett, was his character. He got the girls. He drove the Ferrari. He got the bad guys. Philip Michael Thomas, his kind of partner, assisted him. Didn't get the beautiful women like Don Johnson did. He drove a hoopty, not a Miami Ferrari, Daytona Ferrari, sweet car. And it's like, man, if I have the option of who I want to be, do I want to be Don Johnson, Sonny Crockett, or do I want to be Philip Michael Thomas, Tubbs? It's like, no, man, I want to be DJ. He gets the girls. And it wasn't just I want to be like him. It was actually something I internalized, in that white people make progress. I want to be white. That's the way you want to make it in this world. You want to make it up the proverbial ladder. You need to do as much as you can to shed your own culture, so that you can be accepted by that culture that defines what's success and what is valuable. So for several years, I wanted to be white, even though I knew I couldn't change the color of my skin, but I could do everything I could in order to be accepted by, whites, whether it was in school or sports or what have you. I internalized a belief that being black wasn't enough to equal success in society.
So my mind is running in a bunch of different directions, but I feel like it's another example of ways that we look past who we are and want to be somebody that we're not, because we see that as the ideal that we're to strive for, right? That Don Johnson's got the better life. And so in order to have that life, I need to look and be and act and talk like him.
Yeah. That was fifth grade all the way probably up to about ninth grade. So ninth grade, something significant happened in my life. I'm a freshman varsity wrestler. I'm the only black guy on the team. And there were jokes that were often made. I mean, it's wrestling. It had its own kind of crude culture. And so lots of jokes against black folks, right? And after every joke, oh, Rich, we're not talking about you. Yeah. We're not talking about you. You're not like them.
Interesting.
So there was some differentiation. In one sense, I had kind of made it. I made it into the community that I wanted to make it in. However, they've identified me differently than actually the way I kind of have this cultural relevance to. And so I asked the guys to actually stop. I got into a point where it just become enough. I didn't want to do it anymore. And they kept doing it. So the following year, 10th grade year, I didn't wrestle. And I told them
because of that,
I couldn't do it. I'm going to go play basketball like my dad. Now I'm 5'5", in the 10th grade. I'm actually still 5'5" right now.
Spud Webb made it.
Spud Webb
Just saying.
made it. Hey, my dad was 6'1", and my grandma always promised me that I'd get there. And I'm still waiting on grandma. I'm like, when I get to heaven, Lord, can you give me,
Maybe.
5 more inches or something, whatever.
Yeah.
But I quit wrestling. I go and play basketball. I'm a terrible basketball player. Wrestlers generally don't make good basketball players, in case anybody is wondering. But I rode the bench, and I only got put in when we were getting blown away by 40 points. And the wrestling team would come to every game and watch me and be like, dude, we could have won districts. What are you doing? We need you on the team. And at the end of the year, it was simple. It was like, I just need you guys to stop with the jokes. That's it. And they agreed. They actually agreed. You're right. You're more of a brother to us than, telling jokes and everything. And the last 2 years, 11th and 12th grade year was amazing. It was really great friendships, with these guys. We tore up the town with districts and regional champs and state champs and all that. It was awesome. But it was a turning point for me in that what was valuable is to say really how I felt as I was going internally through my own challenges, being what does it mean to be black, in America and in this multiracial school and on this wrestling team that was getting worked out at that time. And I can speak from my own experience that becoming a boy, becoming a man is not just in the sense of gender, what that means in our gender and masculinity. It also is related to what does it mean specifically to be a person of color and a man. It's something that we live with, we wake up with, we look in the mirror. It's reinforced in positive, affirming ways and reinforced in negative and unaffirming, ways in the media and conversations and relationships with one another. And it's just something that we track with in addition to what it is to simply be a man. And that's something that I think about with my boys, is that I want them to understand how their father sees them as young men, and specifically as young African American men who are raised in a world that will not always affirm them for who they are.
So when you're telling your stories about being on the bench or being on the wrestling mat or having conversations like that with your teammates, I imagine that your boys are leaning in, because it's like, not only is it dad, but dad's telling some of his stories, and dad's telling stories that are directly applicable to the things that they're experiencing today.
Sure.
It may be 20 to 30 years later, but we're still experiencing those things today.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience as you're talking to your boys?
Oh yeah, they're having conversations. I mean, because of the situation that we're facing right now. Black Lives Matter is an often repeated, phrase, and the counter to that is generally all lives matter.
Yeah.
And so my boys are having conversations with their friends they play basketball with, play soccer with, go to school with. Hey, Dad, a friend of mine says all lives matter. How might I respond to that? And so we're having real-time conversations, as they're talking with friends. Or, hey, Dad, my white friend says that he now understands he has white privilege and he wants to do something with his white privilege. What do I text back, to him, in that regards? And so these are very real-time, conversations I'm having with my boys and how they're talking with their friends.
So you brought up Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. What does that phrase mean to you? What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
The first, so when I was young, back in the day, I used to listen to vinyl. I mean, I loved vinyl more than listening to the radio or cassette tapes or CDs when those start to come out. And my folks had a great collection that they passed on to me. And one of those great collections was James Brown. And James Brown had a song back in the 60s, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And that song was created in a time when black bodies were not seen as valuable. And so for black people to see themselves in the beauty of who they are, James Brown creates this song. People love to dance to it, but James Brown was giving a philosophy of life for affirming black bodies. Say it loud. Don't just say it quietly. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Yeah, that's right. That's who you are. It's good. It's beautiful. And so when I hear Black Lives Matter today, I hear James Brown singing, I'm black and I'm proud. And it's to say a statement, first of all, of affirmation to the black community. Black Lives Matter. If no one else affirms it, you affirm it. You own it. You live it. You embrace it. You are valuable. Black Lives Matter.
So back to getting at this internalization that you were talking about before, right? Instead of taking on the racism that has been projected, it's more of like, hey, I am valuable. I do matter.
Right.
My life, my body, my person, I do matter.
Right. So yeah, it's first a statement of internalization. My life matters. And then it's a statement to say to those who are around us, do you see us? So colorblindness has become this ideology that says, I don't judge you based on your color. People want to point to Martin Luther King's, statement in his March on Washington. I dream of the day when my children, your children, won't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. To say, see, Martin Luther King was talking about color blindness. No, he wasn't talking about color blindness. He was talking about color consciousness, and that there is a consciousness that I have about your color that doesn't become something you are defined by. Your ability isn't defined by that. Your ability is not judged, by that one way or the other. I do see your color, but I don't judge you based on that.
Yeah.
And so the second part is to say, hey, man, I want you to see me. When you see Rich, I don't want you to just see Rich. I want you to see Rich as an African-American male, and to see that. Not always track with it. I wonder what this black Rich is thinking about. Like not in that sense, but in the sense that I recognize, in the same way that I recognize that Rich is a man, I also recognize that he is an African American with a unique experience. And so the second thing is that it's an affirmation to the self. It's also a declaration to others that my life matters. And then it is a political statement. It is a political statement because historically, black bodies have not mattered. I think we fail to recall in our history that black bodies were only valued at 3/5 of a person because they were viewed as not having a soul worth saving, redeeming, and their physical bodies were the only things that they were used to having. And so treating it like property, they're not even fully human. You're 3/5 of a human.
Yeah.
And that's on record, like in the Constitution, legally. That doesn't just shift with the change of a law. That's something that's been passed down historically for years. I remember going, and the way it gets transformed is how we're presented in the media, right? It gets translated into how we're projected to, the media. In fact, I remember going to Kenya on a mission trip. And folks it was already different and new that a black person was on this mission trip, right? That was already, because black people don't tend to go. And then what Africans are used to seeing in terms of missionaries, they're used to seeing white missionaries. They're not used to seeing people who look like them. So we go to this restaurant, and on the TV screen are some black people who are rapping. It's kind of American thing. I'm like, how are we in Kenya and I'm watching like Yo MTV raps or something, right? Like,
right.
How would it? And then they turn to me and like, can you rap? And it's like, actually, no, I'm not very good at that rapping thing. And so it's just the way in which we're projected in the media all across the world at what is valuable, that it does make a political statement as well, that black lives do matter.
So I have resonated with the voice that says all lives matter. Mm-hmm. And I have resonated with, or the voices that are suggesting that we not just see color as a divider. Mm-hmm. That has resonated with me as well. But what you're saying is the problem with that is that the skin color and the impact, that lived experience, I like how you say that lived experience gets overlooked. Mm-hmm. When we just say all lives matter, or when we want to look past the color of skin, in effect, what we're doing is we're under acknowledging the experience of what it's like to walk around in dark skin. And it's quite different than walking around in light skin.
Yeah. It also it just doesn't acknowledge the history. If we say all lives matter, then where is it reflected in our history? But not just in our history, because folks were like, well, we don't have slavery anymore, so that ended. Well, slavery turned into terror lynching. Terror lynching turned into mass incarceration, which also, around the same time, you're impacted by inequalities in education and service lending. And so slavery didn't end. Racism didn't stop with slavery. It just kept evolving. It kept evolving.
It took a different form.
It took a different form, right? Yeah. And so when we say, well, all lives matter, and it's like, well, let's look at today and say, well, prove that all lives matter, particularly in those various industries of education and lending and political office and entertainment and business ownership and wealth and so forth and so on. It's like, if it really mattered, we would see it matter in the ledger. Let's look at the ledger and see where it actually matters. And I don't see the equivalence there. I don't see the equity that reflects all lives matter. What I see actually is quite disparaging in the differences between various people groups of color, with Black and African American people being at the bottom.
So while we may want to believe all lives matter, the evidence proves that they don't really all matter, because we've not addressed the history and the way people of color have been treated.
Right. Yeah. I think, George Floyd's killing is what got us into this national conversation, but it was connected to Breonna Taylor. It was connected to Ahmaud Arbery. All of that was happening at the same time. And on the same day as George Floyd's death, Amy Cooper in New York City calls 911 on an African-American man who's bird watching and asks her to simply put her dog on a leash.
Yeah.
And it's actually Amy Cooper I'm more concerned about than the officer who killed George Floyd, because there was a phone call that was made against George Floyd to weaponize the police and police department against George Floyd for something that really is not 911 offensible. That the police are being used against the Black community for things that are not criminal, which suggests, again, the way in which Black bodies are seen. They are seen as criminal. Amy Cooper sees this Black man as a criminal who the police need to come deal with. I don't even know the person who made the phone call against George Floyd, but hey, this guy gave me a counterfeit, $20 bill. That's not a 911 phone call. That's a call to your insurance company. That's not like, hey, we need to get this guy arrested here and go to jail because he tried to give me a $20 fake bill, which ended up not being fake at all. But then the way George Floyd gets criminalized in the media, pulling up his past, pulling up things he's done, which are not connected to why he was being detained, and is certainly not connected to why he was killed, suggests that the way we look at Black bodies is to criminalize them. Dylan Roof, who kills 9 African American innocent people in a church that has historical roots in the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, African American community. Dylan Roof gets taken to Burger King to go get a sandwich before he goes to be jailed. And so he number one walks away with his life, but it's not just his life. Hey man, you hungry? You need anything? You want something to drink? We'll take you to go get something on the way to taking you down, to the precinct. It's like, man, one guy gets to live after committing a real crime, and another man does not get to live after committing what is not a crime, other than the fact that he was Black.
So how do you talk about this with your boys? when you're watching current events, when you're seeing what's going on, obviously the last 4 weeks have had plenty on display.
Sure.
Kicked off in Minneapolis, but spreading around the globe. How do you talk to your boys about this and help them to navigate through what it is that we're all experiencing at this time?
So the other side, I mentioned like the historical way in which to see these things. The other is your worldview. And I'm a follower of Jesus, and I disciple my kids towards that end as well. And so when we read scripture, I read it through the lens of the ethnicity that is present in scripture. So if we're looking at Abram of Ur, we're going on the map and seeing where Ur is and what does that look like culturally. Or when we read the story of Moses, and you know his sister is being changed into a pillar of salt, like or being not, her appearance is being changed. What is that all about? Well, Moses married this black woman that his sister didn't approve of, and so what happens is she gets changed white. Leprosy is almost like this play on colorism, right there, and she's healed and restored, of this leprosy that she receives. So when we're reading scripture, we're actually also reading it through the lens of ethnic and cultural differences. Because I want them to see, one, how these things are present in Scripture. This is not new. This is throughout the Bible. When Jesus in John 4 meets with a woman at the well, it's not simply a woman at the well. It's a Samaritan woman, which is cross ethnicity. I mean, that the two were not supposed to get along with one another. They're supposed to hate each other, right? So he crosses multiple boundaries, and I want to point that out to them so that they're able to see it in their worldview. And I want them to think we are in this world that is fallen. Racism, I believe, fully is a sin, and one that we are called to address. And the best way of doing it is to try to live that out, in Christ. And so I'm preparing them. Hey, how do you engage in this world? Like practically, you boys, all my children run. They run on a track team. They run in our neighborhood. If you're in Ahmaud Arbery's situation, when you're running through our neighborhood, which we send you out to go do, if someone comes up to you with a gun, this is not the time to defend your life. I need you home. And so I have to go through each one of these situations with my children because they're all different. If you're in your home and you hear someone come barging through, you're fully within your right to defend yourself. But it may also go another way where it was the police and it wasn't a robbery or a break-in. I want you to know that your life still matters and what you did is the right thing, even if you get criminalized out in the public. And hey, I hope that you would make the wisest choices in life, but sometimes you're going to be in difficult situations that you have absolutely no control over. But at the end of the day, my goal is that you guys come home. My daughter is that you come home. We want you to come home and do the very best to maintain dignity at the same time. Because what Ahmaud Arbery had Ahmaud Arbery been alive still today, he'd still be facing the trauma of what it is that his blackness was a threat to other people that caused some other people to come chase him down with a weapon, with a gun, not just any kind of weapon. So there's trauma with that. Yes, you're alive. Woo, great. But there's a trauma now, and you actually go through losing a bit of your dignity in the midst of that. And so my boys know that they can ask me about anything. We have scheduled time when we're discipling, one another. And we were actually we're reading through the Bible, and we were at some other place in the Old Testament. They were like, "Look, can we not read tonight? We want to talk, about what's going on." And we can do that. We can talk. But these are also not new conversations for us. When my boys turn 12, they have required reading. They are required to read Roots by Alex Haley and the autobiography of Malcolm X, also by Alex Haley. They're required to read The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. And I have a whole library of books for them to choose from that are historical and also books that are modern, that speak in more into the context of their generation. But those are required readings. They also have to write papers about what they read and how it intersects with our Christian faith and worldview. So you're reading this historically. How does this intersect with your faith? How does it intersect with your walk, with the Lord? And those are just for them. They're just for us. If they want to share them with other people, that's totally fine and up to them. But it's a process of preparing them before a situation happens. We're not just reactionary to these things. We're not just saying Black Lives Matter because everybody else is saying it. We don't just have this perspective about Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or George Floyd because that's new information, for us. I know we've seen this and we've cultivated a narrative that puts us in place in the story from history to present and to dream about what it will look like in the future. So I'm not raising militant folks. I'm not raising little militant African-American kids for those who are, considering that as an idea or thought right now. Although if I was, it'd be certainly my prerogative, right? Because there is a world that just doesn't view them ideally in the sense that they were created beautifully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
So I'm raising them out of the love of God, but and also to understand what you're up against. When James speaks in the New Testament book of James, hey, you guys love God. I heard you say that, but you hate your brother. So actually, you don't really love God,
right?
Because God is actually in the face of the brother you say that you hate. You don't.
There's
love.
dissonance.
There's a major cosmic dissonance there,
Yeah.
And so let's bring that together. So hey, I can't say to my children, you love God, but you hate other people. Like that's inconsistent. God is reflected in all of our bodies, not just some of our bodies. So we have to cultivate the spirit of love and belovedness, which is important, for me to understand who we are and what we're called to give, to other people.
I think the big awareness for me over the recent past, and I don't know how our listeners shake out on this spectrum, whether this is new for them or they're in the thick of it trying to make a positive impact as well in their homes and in the communities. But Rich, I've never had that conversation with my kids the way you have with yours. When I worry about them coming home, it's not because they're going to get run into the jail or they're going to get lynched, so to speak. It's because they're going to have a car accident or they're going to get injured or something like that. Like I don't have to think about the components of this that you as a Black man, Black father have to.
Right. Yeah, that's we all have as fathers, the opportunity to have the talk, sex talk.
Right, right.
And additionally, I also have the space. I think it's a non-negotiable requirement to have the race talk. But it's also something that I think today introduces the opportunity for all of us to have the race talk with our children.
That's right.
Not just if you're an African-American father raising African-American children. So even white fathers, even Asian-American, Chinese-American fathers, hey, we all can be having this conversation about race because it affects us all. We're only talking right now about a black and white issue of race, but man, there's so much more in between there with immigration and the model minority narrative that gets put on Asian American people. And so racism, again, as it's been categorized with these layers and values on whose bodies mean more, just puts us against one another. It puts us against one another to the degree that it never was intended to be from the beginning of creation or the beginning of time, if you will, but gets worked out in our social systems here, particularly in the West and even more specifically in the United States. Like we don't really track historically with the fact that all white people weren't really white. Irish, if you have Irish in your background, you weren't considered white when you first arrived to this country. You were actually considered really bad words and names that would be too inappropriate, to mention on the airwaves, because they saw them as less than. And there's some stories about in New York City in particular where Irish people and African American people had started to come together to speak against how the government was oppressing them in the job place and in the housing market in particular. They caught wind of it and said, "Well, we got to figure this out." And so overnight, Irish people are considered white, which then gives them an opportunity for better jobs, better land, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. In fact, Eastern Europeans had to go to court to petition to be white so that they could own land, join politics, get further education, and obtain loans and so forth, because only white people could do that. So this whole idea of who's white has been constructed and manipulated over time to the point where white people don't even understand how deeply it's affected them. Historically, Irish folk, I'm sorry, y'all weren't considered white. You were associated actually a slight hair above African Americans. You were an indentured servant and slave actually in the earliest times when you arrived in this country, and they thought that's probably where you're going to be the rest of your life because that's how they identified you. But white people today don't know much about their history. What I tell a lot of white folks today is I think one of the most important things you can do is get out the family tree and see how far you can go back in your genealogy and understand where your family comes from. What parts of Europe do they come from, or South America? Hey, where does my whole family come from? And then as you do that, also look at what they had to give up in order to survive being in America. People had to give up last names, first names, so that they could be socially acceptable in this country. Man, there's a loss for that. There's a loss of identity for coming and being in America. And folks will say, well, that's what makes America great. I mean, that's
the melting pot, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're the melting pot. Yes, but you melt away and you lose so much culturally, not just language, a way of life that was really valued and valuable. Actually, it is valuable to the whole world. There's things that every culture has been able to give as a gift to the world that gets lost for the sake of e pluribus unum, all being one. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, we can be one, not like a melting pot, but really more like a gumbo. That's what I like to think. Let's not be a melting pot. Let's be a gumbo where you can taste all of the flavors and they rub off on each other and it all just makes something really good and delicious. Let's be a gumbo, not a melting pot. I think one thing I'd like to just emphasize here of importance is that all Black people aren't experiencing this moment the same. We're experiencing it quite differently. We all don't see it the same. We all don't think the solutions are the same. What we say in that regards is that the Black community is not a monolith. There's not. We don't all experience it, see it, or believe the solutions are the same. For one, we all don't come from the same community. When Black people are out in the community, they all don't come from the same neighborhood. Yeah. We all don't even call it the hood. I actually live in a bedroom community with a 2-car garage. I have 2 master's degrees, which you don't see that when you see me. Yeah. I grew up in a middle class, multiracial neighborhood just outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. So my cultural experience, even as I relate to this, is quite different from where we are recording this, just north of the Linden community, which is a highly impoverished community, which has a lot of complexity to it, particularly for people of color and African American in particular. The experience that Black people live with there is different from mine, where the opportunities are different, the experiences are different, the worldview and the value system is different. And how I've been able to navigate in this white world is to a greater skill level than perhaps many folks in a community like Linden. So there's not just one way in which to see this. And I see this reflected even in my own children. My oldest son wants to go to Morehouse College, just like I did, which is a historically black university,
Yep.
all male. Martin Luther King went to school there, Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, and now Rich Johnson. There you go. So he wants to go to a historically black college. The way he sees the world is through this filter of himself as a young African-American boy. And my wife is fair-skinned. She's African-American. Her parents are both African-American. Both of their parents are African-American, but they're all very fair-skinned. And that gene is quite strong and reflected in our family. And so all my children look closely to the skin tone of my wife. And so my oldest son really wrestles with whether or not his light skin is an advantage. That if he were in a position similar to George Floyd, because he's middle class, because he has lighter skin, because he's not the same height and stature as, say, a George Floyd, and probably won't ever be because his dad is 5'5", does that give him, quote unquote, an advantage for surviving in a world where George Floyd ends and life ends in death, and his would possibly end in life? He wrestles with that. My second son, he doesn't want to go to Morehouse College. He doesn't want to go to historically black college at all anywhere. He wants to go to Stanford University. Like, where did that come from?
Right.
I have absolutely no idea. But, he picked one of the most expensive schools in the country, and we are taking donations
right, exactly.
to pay that off.
We'll post your GoFundMe link at the end of the show.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And when you ask him what his second choice is Oxford. Not Oxford of Ohio, where Miami University is. No, he wants to go to
the
Oxford across the pond.
Yeah.
I'm like, where does this come from? Whose child are you? And both of them, we have the same expectation. When you turn 12, we're going to start getting into classic readings and works that are unique to the black community, because you're not getting that in school. Mm-hmm. You're not getting that history in school. And Black History Month is relegated to a few contributions of the same names and people we hear over and over again. We're much more than just the contributions that we bring to the table. And so they're both getting the same at-home education and still processing that differently. Yeah. That's two bodies right there. My third son wants to be a police officer. He's wanted to be a police officer ever since he could start talking, and you start asking him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so even now at this age of 11, soon to be 12, he wants to be a police officer. We don't deter that, from him. As parents do, we want to help find the gifts in our child and affirm them, the dreams they have. We want to help them connect their gifts and skills and talents to their vocations. I think he would make a great police officer. He's always telling on people in our house. He's always trying to correct someone and let us know when someone's done something wrong.
Strong sense of justice.
Very strong sense of justice. I'm like, yes, sir, you would make a great police officer. So I want him to understand these two lenses of history and worldview to shape when he becomes a police officer by the grace of God. That he is a police officer who maintains not only his dignity, but the dignity, of others. Yeah. My daughter's not quite sure what she wants to do yet.
She's got some time.
She's got some time. Now, her mother went to Hampton University, which is another historically black college. And so she's, of course, trying to convince my daughter to go that route. So, but we're all seeing this differently.
Even in the same family.
Yeah. How are we processing this? How are we experiencing it as a family? There are two Independence Days in America. One we're very familiar with, July 4th, Independence Day, 1776. And in the year 1776, there were approximately 4 million Africans held as slaves. So that independence and freedom was not for everyone. Mm-hmm. The other Independence Day is June 19th, 1865. That was the day the last African community heard that they were actually free in Galveston, Texas. So there's two Independence Days. And in our family, we talk about both of them. Here's the independence of America from England. And then here's the independence of us as an African-American people and community within our own country. And we want our kids to understand the historical value and significance of both of them, they are African American, there is this sort of challenge in like, what am I mostly identified as? Well, based on our worldview, you're mostly identified as a beloved child of God. That's who you are mostly identified as. It
Transcends all the
transcends
other
everything,
categories.
transcends all the other categories. It doesn't wipe them away. We
Yeah.
want to make sure they understand that. It doesn't wipe them away. Actually, it informs them even more deeply than if they were to be informed of their cultural identity apart from God and Christ. But when you pour Christ into your cultural identity, man, it does even more to enhance you. So I want them to understand that they are the beloved children of God, period. And then I'm the beloved child of God who is a son and daughter of Rich and Shala Johnson. I'm a beloved son and daughter of God who is the son of Rich and Shala Johnson from Columbus, Ohio, and uniquely wrapped in this beautiful, wonderful African American skin that isn't just African American, it's also informed by our First Native Sioux Indian background we have on my side, Cherokee on my wife's side, as well as white American, some on my side, as well as my wife's side. We're informed by all of that makes us culturally who we are, and God says is valuable.
It's beautiful.
It should be. It should be for every single one of us to understand who we are, regardless of what the world says about us. And this actually, when we understand who we are, we can affirm for others who they are as well. You're a gift. You're a gift in the unique way that you've been made. And the cultural experiences that have shaped you are not all who you are. They're actually who you are becoming on the way who you were intended to be. And so all of us have that in our background. We're destined for even more than what we experience right now.
What would you say to that listener, particularly to that dad who wants to be in the mix and wants to be a better man, set the bar high for himself and for his boys that are coming behind him? What would you say to that dad to challenge and encourage and to equip to grow in this understanding and the ability to engage this issue in a more thoughtful, in a way that's maybe through the Jesus lens, right? Like all of those things. What would you say to that listener?
Well, I would first say, one, prepare yourself for a long journey. As you have described, and we talked early on, there are a lot of terms that we may not be familiar with, and there's a lot of history that ones may not have understood. And so there's a long journey to this. I think first prepare yourself for the long journey by giving yourself some grace to just take it slow. Don't try to read every book, watch every video, listen to every podcast and talk, and try to become the most aware person overnight. Just give yourself some time, and in fact, invite your son on that journey with you. Hey, we're going to go on a journey together. So in the same way that you might read a book together or watch a movie together and discuss who you identify with in the movie, and do this kind of work together as well. I would say to begin with Black authors, and so there's quite a bit of more research, better research about how this conversation about race uniquely affects white people, and certainly read those books. I think those would be very helpful. But I would also encourage you. Black folks have been having this conversation for a very long time, and so there is something to learn from Black authors, both from our history as well as our present, as a way to begin. That's the most culturally distant way that we can start to bring things forward. I understand quite well that when I have conversations with white people about this, I'm not automatically trusted, because they would expect me to say that there was racism. They would expect me to say that there was racial injustice or implicit bias, and et cetera, et cetera. They don't necessarily expect to hear it from another, white person. And if they do, then they're considered leftist or liberal or, what have you. And so there are some things to learn from other white folks. And I would say, hey, you can Google those things, and there's some great books out there. I can make some recommendations for you. as a place to start. But if we start with the aspect of humility, I have something to learn here. I actually don't know everything there is to know about race. I actually don't know there is to everything to know about history. So I'm gonna learn this through the lens and experience of somebody else. That takes a great deal of humility, and fathers, I think, could model that really well for their sons. Say, we're gonna have a humble approach in how we engage this issue, from the respect and regards that we don't know everything, and there are people who know more than we do. There's actually some people maybe who think differently than we do, and it's okay to engage in dialogue with them and take a posture of humility so that we can learn and be better informed. And I think we're going to particularly do that with regards to learning our history, our own history as a family. I think that's another great thing you can do as a father. I actually do our family tree with my boys. And so I want you to get to know your grandfather and your great grandfather and your great aunts and great uncles, and where we came from, Mississippi and North Carolina and West Virginia, and all that of who makes you who you are today. That's a regular conversation I have, with my children. That'd be another great place to start. Hey, son, I want us to look at our history together. I want to look at our past together and see what we can discover. Take your son on a journey and on an exploration about, your history. So do it humbly, do it historically, and probably the hardest part is to do it honestly. As you become aware of these things, is to be honest about what you see and to say what you see. There's quite a defense wall that comes up in this conversation.
That's right.
Which humility helps to break down, and some history helps to inform. But then we still have to be honest. When all the walls are down, it's like, what do you see? You still have an opportunity to accept what you see or reject it.
Close your eyes.
Yeah, close your eyes, yeah. To move on and to do something else. But to honestly see it and say it, that brings another level of introspection. And then go have that conversation with the black friend that you have, the black neighbor, the black coworker, or so forth. Maybe even the black person you say, they really are my friend. But I question how deep the friendship is on whether or not you've had this conversation with that friend. And I think it's meaningful. And I think 9 times out of 10, if you ask that black friend how close your friendship is, and you haven't had this conversation, it's not as close as you thought it was. Like, man, but we don't want to be seen for our color, but our color forms the way in which we see the world. And we do want to share that with our friend in any other way that we want to share experiences like camping or biking or running. I want to share an experience with you. And when I share this experience with you, I want you to say back to me, man, I've never seen it that way before. And that values and validates the experience of that friend who is a person of another color.
Yep.
Just like I have a friend from Morrow County, Ohio. I mean, it's country as all get out. And we've been camping out there before. And the first time I went camping, I told all my black friends, man, if I don't come back, here's where I'm going. Black folk don't usually do this camping thing, man. And I had to borrow everything, tent, sleeping bag, and so forth and so on. I had the most beautiful time sitting under the stars and skeet shooting and drinking beer and smoking cigars, things that I enjoy doing today because this friend introduced them to me in a way that was valuable for him and his family. Like, man, so I love going down, skeet shooting, and I love going down paintballing and having some deep dish, pizza and sleeping under the stars. Those are maybe something that's held culturally in one people group, but it's meant to be shared with everybody, and everybody can actually experience something good from that. In the very same way, we can experience that by learning about African American culture and experiences and the way in which we process the world, and to see, man, that was really beautiful. That was really valuable. Thank you for inviting me to that. And now when I bring this back to my family, this is something we actually do together, not in a culturally appropriative way, but in a genuine way in which we value this cultural experience as something that we include in our own family.
Back to that learning and humility and just being open, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So we really do. We camp now. I got my own camping stuff.
Nice.
I got my own gear. We go camping as a family. Sometimes go with grandparents and in-laws, and we have 15, 16 people out there camping together up in Put-in-Bay and anywhere else we can find. So we enjoy it. It's not just something that white people do. Now it's something that the Johnsons do. The Johnsons go camping now. Johnsons go hiking. What? Yeah. And I tell them, black men, like, what? You doing what, man? You doing what? Hey, what you it's like, yeah, I've gained an experience, and that's just something that I love and I enjoy, and you should come with me. Matter of fact, next time we go hang out, let's go for a hike. Let's go for a walk. See what we see, what we experience together. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I told you this before we recorded, that you've been significantly influential, even in a short period of time in my life. And I'm really grateful that you're willing to bring that to our listeners here. It's a topic that some of us are seeing perhaps for the first time, even though you've been living this for your entire 40 plus years.
Yeah.
And so thank you for just bringing that and for helping us to be smarter and inviting us into a deeper conversation where we can grow and we can learn and we can see what is, even if we don't like it, we can see what is, starting with that awareness, right? And then we can move toward, okay, now how can I be better? How can I do better? How can I make an impact?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all your listeners. I wish the best to everybody as you engage in this journey.
Guys, I don't know where you are on your journey as a man or a father on this big topic, but I hope that, like me, you've been challenged by what Rich had to say and are inspired to be and to do better. And I hope the question you're asking is, what should I do with what Rich has just shared? For those of you who are readers, there's a resource document attached to this episode that you can download and begin working through. And there's a lot there. So as Rich said, don't try to digest it all overnight. Prepare to play a longer game here. Also, if you want to follow Rich, you can find him on Instagram at Rich Johnson Online, or you can learn more about the church and the work that he's doing there through the church website, sanctuarycolumbus.com. And as always, if you have any feedback for us, you can get us at our email address, feedback@thenextmanup.com, or follow us on Facebook at NMU Journey. However, wherever, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, guys, that's all for now. Until next time, adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.